What happens if you take Lamictal for 10 years? Are there long-term side effects? Does it still work after all that time? Well, for me, it's yes to both of those, but it's more complicated than that. I went on Lamictal 10 years ago in the fall of 2013, which means that I've taken Lamictal over 3,600 times in the last 10 years. That's a lot of psych meds. So today I want to take a few moments to talk about long-term Lamictal treatment and what that's meant for me. Specifically, I'm going to focus on side effects and overall effectiveness, all through the lens of that 10-year period and whether things changed or didn't over time. So grab a beverage, sit back, and let's get into it. Quick disclaimer, this video is about me and my experience being on Lamictal for 10 years. My story is not exactly the same as anyone else's, and you can't necessarily expect my results to be the same as your results. So this is just my personal take on it. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying this is how it is for everyone. I'm just saying that this is how it is for me. Thank you. So if you clicked on this video, you might already know a little bit about Lamictal, or Lamotrigine as it's also commonly called. How it's a mood stabilizer that's used to treat bipolar disorder. But more specifically, it's an anticonvulsant that somehow treats recurrent episodes of bipolar depression. It was approved for use in the United States in 1994, and it's also an effective treatment for a few different kinds of epilepsy. We aren't 100% sure of its mechanism of action in treating mood disorders, but we do know that it blocks calcium and sodium channels and might work through either or both of those processes. And if you are new here, my name is Kit, and I have schizoaffective disorder, which is a condition where someone experiences symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, but also symptoms of a mood disorder, either major depression, or in my case, bipolar. And it's that last part, that bipolar part, that landed me a script of Lamictal in the first place. So, now that you know a little bit about it, let's talk long-term side effects. When I first went on Lamictal, I was taking a dose that was much lower than what I take now. But even with that, I experienced some annoying side effects from the very beginning. I'm mainly referring to one of the most common ones, which is word-finding issues. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, well, let me just explain what it's like. Imagine you're about to speak on something, like a sentence or two, and it's all formulated in your head. You know exactly what you're going to say, what words you're going to use, etc. But then, when you go to say it, everything's fine, except that one word is totally wrong. And you have no idea why. Even though you thought it through, knew exactly what you intended to say, there was still a last-minute substitution that happened without your permission. That's what Lamictal does. And it can go even further. Because sometimes it's not just one word, it can be a whole mess of a sentence. I find that my brain sometimes makes up words that don't exist, uses the wrong tense of a verb, or says things in the wrong order. So occasionally I have to say to those around me, hey, let me try again. It's not disabling by any means, but it can be confusing for me and those in my immediate vicinity. And over the 10 years I've taken this medication, it hasn't really gotten better. I've only gotten better at dealing with it. I honestly fumble my words a lot and have trouble getting out thoughts sometimes. And it actually can be funny too, because I was with a car and a friend. Case in point. And it can actually be funny sometimes. Like recently, I'll tell you a little story. Recently, I was driving down the road with one of my friends, and we were in the mountains. And in the mountains, deer happened to show up. And so we saw a bunch of deer on the side of the road, and I looked at the deer. I knew they were deer. I intended to say deer, and what came out of my mouth was, wow, look at all those birds. And my friend was like, what? And I'm like, what? Because I didn't intend to say that at all, but it was just kind of like a funny substitution, and that's kind of what it looks like in the real world for me, is just saying little things like that. So we laughed about it for probably way too long, but that's just an example of recent times that it's happened. But naturally, it can be a more serious problem where it's really important that I have to get the right words out and can't. So it can cause some issues in that case. But either way, I deal with it, and it's all part of the experience. The next side effect that has unfortunately lasted this long is sleep pattern issues. When I first started taking Lamictal, I found that while I was sleeping, I wasn't sleeping well. I would get what could be considered a normal amount of sleep, 8 or 9 hours, but I would still find myself falling asleep the next day, often during classes. And the worst thing was that caffeine did absolutely nothing for it. I was just tired all the time. So I went to my doctor, explained my grievances, and he prescribed me sleeping pills, which actually did fix the problem. I theorized that Lamictal wasn't letting me sleep deeply, but regardless of what it did, the pills helped, and I stayed on them for many years. But about 8 months ago, I went off them for a variety of reasons. I just quit taking them entirely, and to my horror, the sleeping issues that I dealt with when I first started taking it returned full force. Almost immediately at that. Even after all this time, they were still there, just waiting for me. I was so disappointed. And so I drank a lot of coffee, and of course, it did nothing. I was napping after work, trying to get things in order, but even that didn't really help. And it was a weird kind of tiredness too, because it would come and go in waves. I would be weary and sleepy 1 hour and then totally awake the next. And so my strategy was to basically wait out the tiredness when it showed up. But I got really lucky, and there was something that did fix it, and that thing was zinc. I went on zinc tablets for a totally different reason, but I noticed that when I started taking them, all of my sleep pattern issues had basically disappeared overnight. And it's been months since I started taking it, and I haven't had to nap since. Now I have to say this, don't go on zinc because it worked for me. If you want to try it, see if it helps your own sleeping issues, please, please, please talk to your doctor first. And yes, it might work if you try it, but I am not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, and I cannot give medical advice. So again, if you're interested, talk to your doctor. Whew, okay, mirror me back. Now, I don't know what I would have done if zinc hadn't stepped in when it did, but I probably would have just suffered through it. But it's managed now, and that's what matters. Other than those 2 side effects, I don't really have any other long-term issues. I'm sure when I'm further down the line, there'll probably be some stuff. But for now, it's just those 2 and my unending disappointment that neither of them has gotten better over time. Even though I really hoped they would, they didn't. So, oh well. And now I want to get into the true value of this video, which is answering the question, is Lamictal still effective after 10 years? Well, yes, but I kind of want to dive deeper into this. To do that, I need to explain my origins with Lamictal and what it was like in the first place. When I was a senior in high school, I started suffering from mood swings that would go up and down by the hour. I would be up one class period and down the next, and there was no regulation to it. And I need to clarify, my mood swings had absolutely nothing to do with the situation. And this wasn't due to something like borderline personality disorder, which is a condition where people can experience very rapid mood swings. But for those with BPD, the mood swings are situational, and that was not the case for me. Mine had no rhyme or reason. They were due to chemical imbalances in my brain, and it felt like an emotional roller coaster. I remember swinging in a hammock in the middle of the woods with my boyfriend at the time and asking him, "Hey, do you think I might be bipolar?" And he told me, "Maybe." And that was the moment where I realized that I had to get help for what was going on. So, after having a breakdown in my primary care doctor's office, I landed myself an appointment with a psychiatrist and was immediately diagnosed with something called cyclothymia, which is the mildest form of bipolar disorder you can have, where you do have lows and highs and cycle between them, but the lows don't meet criteria for depression and the highs don't meet criteria for mania or hypomania. And I was put on Lamictal to treat those rapid mood swings I was going through. And it also had a nice effect of treating my mild depressive symptoms as well, because they were starting to cause some issues. Even if they didn't meet criteria for major depression, they were still negatively affecting my life, and Lamictal helped me with that. Honestly, it started working right away for me, which was a big relief because I was really suffering. And in the weeks following that, while I titrated up to the target dosage, things only got better. I got my life back thanks to Lamictal, and honestly, I think I was just a nicer person to be around, because my emotions felt like they were under control for the first time in years. I mean, my earliest depressive symptoms date back to when I was 14, and my hypomanic symptoms even before that. I wasn't really depressed anymore. I wasn't rapid cycling anymore, and I felt like my life had been saved, and in many ways, it had. Anyways, in the years to come after that, things would get worse. We would up the Lamictal whenever my depressive symptoms started acting up, and about 4 years after I started taking it, I had a depressive episode that was so bad that it landed me a diagnosis of bipolar 2. And in order to treat it, my doctor added lithium into the mix. And if you don't already know, in psychiatry, lithium and Lamictal are basically a dream team. And I can say firsthand that yes, that's true. They work really well together. But I wondered, with lithium working to keep my bipolar depression away, did I really need to stay on the highest dose of Lamictal? Could we lower it and maybe reduce the word-finding issues a bit? Well, this is where I get into a story time. Lowering Lamictal was an experiment that epically failed. I was a senior in college, so this is about 2017, 2018, and I was pretty stable at this point. I'd gotten over a bad mixed episode a while back, and at this point I was doing really well, and so my doctor and I decided that we would try to lower the Lamictal a bit, just to see what would happen. And I sunk into a depression so deep that my usual coping skills did not work, and I felt like I was floundering. I would stay in bed until 3 and 4 p.m., struggle to do my homework, stare at the sunset, and then go back to sleep. I had no motivation to do much of anything beyond the bare minimum. And honestly, I was just passing time until I could go to sleep again. I was miserable. And I learned then that even after all this time, the Lamictal still protected me against the worst of my bipolar depression. So I went back up to the dose I was previously on, and as of now, there are no plans to try and lower it again. And I'll just deal with the word-finding issues. And it's that story that tells me that Lamictal still works. While that incident was nearly 6 years ago now, I have an inkling that the Lamictal continues to work. Because while I do still have depressive episodes, they're not as disabling. They're not as bad as the one I had when I lowered Lamictal. And I think there's something to be said for that. Lamictal makes the depression manageable, and that's honestly the true power of psych meds, is that they make symptoms manageable. And the biggest thing, the biggest difference, the most valuable thing that Lamictal has ever done for me is to keep me away from those rapid cycling mood swings I had before I started it. Like, since I've taken Lamictal, I have not had a single instance of those up and down by the hour mood swings again. And even though my mood disorder side got worse and worse, resembling that of cyclothymia first, then bipolar 2, and then bipolar 1, I still haven't had those rapid shifting mood swings. Like, I've had full mania that has sent me to the other side of the world, but still no up and down on the hour mood swings. And I'm actually pretty grateful for that, because that was a roller coaster and an experience that I never want to go through again, because it was so confusing to not know what was up and what was down. So in that way, it's been helping me all this time, and hopefully it will continue to do that. So yeah, that's what happens when you take Lamictal for 10 years. It works basically as well as it did when I first started taking it. It saved me from all that rapid cycling, and yeah, it's given me side effects that'll probably never go away. But it's amazing. So my question to you is this: do you take Lamictal, and have you been taking it for a long time? Has it worked well for you? Do you find that you also have similar tenacious side effects? Let me know in the comment section down below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me and making the uncomfortable comfortable. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.